Prisoners of Geography, by Tim Marshall. Introduction. Have you ever wondered what a world leader thinks about, late at night, when the cameras are off and the weight of a nation rests on their shoulders? You might imagine them wrestling with economic policy, or political rivals, or the latest crisis flashing across the news. And you'd be right. But there's something else, something far more ancient and unchangeable, that keeps them awake. Imagine, for a moment, Vladimir Putin, the powerful leader of Russia. The book we're exploring today, Prisoners of Geography, opens with a powerful image. It suggests that if Putin is a religious man, he might go to bed each night, say his prayers, and ask God a simple, desperate question: why didn't you put some mountains in Ukraine? Why mountains? Because if there were mountains in Ukraine, the great, flat expanse of land known as the North European Plain wouldn't be a wide-open highway for armies to march straight toward Moscow. For centuries, that flat land has been Russia's greatest vulnerability. The Poles, the Swedes, the French under Napoleon, and the Germans, twice, have all come from that direction. That single geographical feature has shaped Russia's fears, its ambitions, and its aggression for 500 years. They are, in a very real sense, prisoners of their own geography. And so are we all. That is the profound and eye-opening idea at the heart of Tim Marshall's masterpiece, Prisoners of Geography. Marshall isn't just an academic, he's a man who has spent over 25 years as a foreign correspondent, reporting from the front lines of more than 30 countries, including the wars in Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. He's seen firsthand how the rivers, mountains, deserts, and seas are not just backdrops for human drama, they are often the authors of it. In this journey together, we're going to unlock the secrets of the world map. I promise you, by the time we're done, you will never look at the world the same way again. You'll see that the lines that divide countries are often just ink on a map, fighting against the powerful, ancient truths of the land itself. You'll understand why some nations are destined for wealth and power, while others are locked in a constant struggle. You'll learn to look at the news not just as a series of random events, but as the latest chapter in a story that was written into the very crust of the earth millions of years ago. This isn't just about maps. It's about understanding the hidden forces that shape our world, our leaders, and our future. Book summary. Let's begin our journey with that very same problem that keeps Russian leaders awake at night. If you look at a map of Russia, you see the largest country in the world, spanning 11 time zones. It seems immense, powerful, almost unconquerable. But its leaders have always seen it differently. They see a nation with its heartland, centered around Moscow, sitting on that vast North European plain. To the east, they have the Ural Mountains, a helpful barrier. To the south, the Caucasus Mountains. To the north, the frozen Arctic Ocean. But to the west, nothing. Just flat, open land. This is Russia's great insecurity. The author, Tim Marshall, explains that for centuries, Russia's strategy has been driven by one goal: push outward to control that flatland, to create a buffer zone. Under leaders from Ivan the Terrible to Catherine the Great, Russia expanded. It pushed west to the Carpathian Mountains, it swallowed Ukraine, and it took over the Baltic states, all to gain a protective ring around Moscow. When the Soviet Union was formed, it was just the Russian Empire with a new name, pushing that buffer zone all the way to Berlin. So, when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s, Russia didn't just lose its ideology, it lost its buffer zone. Its defenses retreated hundreds of miles eastward. From Moscow's perspective, this was a geopolitical disaster. They watched in horror as their former buffer states, Poland, Hungary, Romania, the Baltic nations, all joined NATO, the very military alliance created to contain them. This brings us to today. When you see Russia's actions in Ukraine, it's not just about politics. It's about geography. As long as Ukraine had a pro-Russian government, Moscow could rest easy, knowing its buffer was intact. But a pro-Western Ukraine, one that might one day join NATO, that was a threat that geography would not allow Russia to tolerate. But Russia has a second great geographical weakness, a second prison. It has almost no access to the world's oceans. Its northern ports, like Murmansk, freeze for several months a year. Vladivostok, on the Pacific, is locked in by the Sea of Japan, which is dominated by, well, Japan. This prevents Russia from being a truly global naval power and a global trading power. Water transport is vastly cheaper than land or air. This is why Russia was so desperate to hold on to Crimea. It wasn't just about protecting ethnic Russians, it was about the port of Sevastopol, Russia's only major warm-water port. Losing that would have been like losing a lung. So, when a pro-Western government came to power in Kiev, Putin had very little choice from a geopolitical perspective. He had to take Crimea. He could not be the leader who lost Russia's only real access to the warm waters of the world. Russia is a prisoner of its geography, forever pushing west for security and south for a gateway to the world. Now, let's travel across the globe to a nation that won the geographical lottery, the United States of America. If Russia is a story of weakness and insecurity, America is a story of security and power, gifted by its landscape. Marshall paints a picture of a country that is, in his words, the real estate agent's dream listing: location, location, location. Think about it. To the east and west, two massive oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, act as the world's greatest moats, making a conventional military invasion almost impossible. To the north and south, it has neighbors, Canada and Mexico, that are friendly and pose no existential threat. Compare that to Russia's nervous glances across the plain at Germany, or China's wary watch over its 14 neighbors. But America's greatest gift is what lies within its borders. While Russia struggles with frozen ports and unnavigable rivers, the heartland of America is dominated by the Mississippi River basin. Marshall points out an astonishing fact: the greater Mississippi system has more miles of navigable river than the rest of the world combined. These rivers flow smoothly from the interior all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, acting as a natural superhighway for trade. This allowed the early United States to transport goods cheaply, connect its vast territories, and build a unified economy and culture in a way that other large nations could only dream of. The leaders of the young United States seemed to understand this instinctively. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson faced a problem. The French controlled New Orleans, the port at the mouth of the Mississippi. He called it the one single spot, the possessor of which is our natural and habitual enemy. Control of that port meant control of America's economic lifeline. But instead of a war, a stroke of genius and luck occurred. Napoleon, needing money for his wars in Europe, offered to sell not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana Territory, a vast expanse of land that doubled the size of the United States overnight. For just $15 million, America gained mastery over the world's greatest inland waterway and the fertile heartland that would become its agricultural powerhouse. It was the greatest real estate deal in history. From there, America pushed relentlessly west, across the plains, over the Rockies, all the way to the Pacific, fulfilling its destiny as a two-ocean superpower. Unlike other nations, which have to spend enormous resources defending vulnerable borders, America's geography allows it to project its power outward, across the very oceans that protect it. It is the master of its own house, and a warden of the world's sea lanes, a luxury its geography bestowed upon it. Now, if Russia and America are defined by their wide-open spaces, one a vulnerability, the other a strength, our next story is about a barrier so immense it has defined the relationship between two of the world's most populous nations for thousands of years. Let's turn to China and India. These two giants, home to nearly a third of humanity, share a very long border. They are not natural allies, politically or culturally. Logic might suggest they would have a history of major wars. And yet, they have fought only one brief, month-long battle in 1962. Why? The answer is the Himalayas. Between them stands the highest mountain range in the world, a natural wall so formidable that it's practically impossible to advance a large military force through or over it. This single geographical feature has kept these two civilizations largely separate, forcing them to focus their attention and ambitions elsewhere. They are like two giants living in the same house but separated by an unbreachable wall, each minding their own business on their side of the home. This brings us to one of the book's most crucial concepts, the geopolitics of fear. To understand modern China, you have to understand its obsession with creating buffer zones, just like Russia. But China's buffer isn't just about flat plains, it's about controlling the high ground. The birthplace of Chinese civilization is the North China Plain, a large, fertile area vulnerable to attack. To the north, the Gobi Desert offered some protection, but the real threat throughout history came from nomadic warriors. So, for millennia, China's strategy was to expand outward until it reached natural, defensible barriers. This explains China's relentless drive to control two vast, non-Chinese territories, Xinjiang in the west and, most famously, Tibet in the southwest. Tibet is often seen in the West through the lens of human rights and the peaceful struggle of the Dalai Lama. But Beijing sees it through the cold, hard lens of geography. Tibet is the roof of the world. If China did not control Tibet, its great rival, India, might. That would give India the commanding heights of the Tibetan Plateau, a perfect strategic base from which to threaten the Chinese heartland. Even more critically, Tibet is China's water tower. The sources of three of China's most important rivers, the Yellow, the Yangtze, and the Mekong, are located on the Tibetan Plateau. For a country with a fifth of the world's population but only 7% of its fresh water, the idea that a foreign power could control the headwaters of its life-giving rivers is an existential threat. It simply cannot be allowed. This is why China has poured so much effort into cementing its control over Tibet, building roads and railways into the forbidding landscape. That railway, which European engineers said was impossible to build, now brings millions of Han Chinese settlers into Tibet, slowly but surely changing the demographics and diluting Tibetan culture. For Beijing, this is a matter of national security. The Free Tibet movement can protest, but in a battle between Hollywood stars and the geopolitical imperatives of a superpower, geography usually wins. China is securing its land-based prison walls. But China, like Russia, has another problem. A maritime problem. For 4,000 years, China was a land power. Now, to fuel its massive economy, it needs resources from around the world, oil from the Middle East, minerals from Africa. And those resources must travel by sea. Suddenly, China finds itself imprisoned again, this time by the ocean. Look at a map of the seas off China's coast. To get to the wider Pacific and Indian Oceans, Chinese ships must pass through a series of straits and channels controlled by other nations, many of them allies of the United States. This is what Beijing calls the First Island Chain, a line running from Japan, through Taiwan, the Philippines, and down to Malaysia. In peacetime, this isn't a huge problem. But in a time of conflict, this chain could be used to blockade China, choking off its trade and energy supplies. The Strait of Malacca, between Malaysia and Indonesia, is a particularly terrifying choke point. It's less than 2 miles wide at its narrowest point, and nearly 80% of China's oil imports pass through it. This is why you see China being so aggressive in the South China Sea, building artificial islands, and claiming vast swaths of ocean as its own territory. It's not just about national pride, it's a desperate attempt to break out of its maritime prison, to secure its sea lanes, and to push the U.S. Navy farther away from its coast. China is trying to turn its front yard into a fortress. This brings us to a darker side of our story, where the prison walls were not created by nature, but drawn with a ruler and a pencil by men in faraway lands. This is the story of Africa and the Middle East. If America's geography is a blessing and Russia's a curse, Africa's is a tragedy of isolation and division. Marshall argues that Africa's geography is a key reason why it has been less technologically and politically successful than other parts of the world. First, its physical features created immense barriers to connection. Its coastline is incredibly smooth, with very few natural deepwater harbors, making maritime trade difficult from the start. Its great rivers, like the Congo and the Zambezi, are majestic but mostly useless for transport, as they are broken up by countless waterfalls and rapids. Europe's navigable rivers, like the Rhine and Danube, connected people and created trading hubs. Africa's rivers kept them apart. Then there's the Sahara Desert, a sand sea almost as large as the United States, which effectively cut off sub-Saharan Africa from the exchange of ideas, technology, and trade that flowed across the Eurasian landmass for thousands of years. Into this already challenging landscape came the European colonial powers. They didn't come to unite or develop, they came to extract. And to make their administration easier, they did something catastrophic. They drew lines on a map. These lines, which became the borders of modern African countries, had almost no relationship to the realities on the ground. They sliced through tribal lands, lumping together rival ethnic groups who had nothing in common, while separating others who saw themselves as one people. They created artificial states, prisons of political geography from which many Africans are still trying to escape. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is perhaps the most tragic example. It's a vast country, larger than Western Europe, but it was cobbled together by Belgian colonialists with no logic other than the extent of their reach. It contains over 200 ethnic groups. The result? A state that has never truly been a nation, a place ravaged by what is sometimes called Africa's World War, a conflict that has claimed up to 6 million lives since the late 1990s, largely ignored by the outside world. The same story of artificial borders echoes across the Middle East. The very name Middle East is a European invention, betraying a view of the world centered in London. For centuries, the region was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, which divided its territory into administrative areas that roughly corresponded to where different tribes and religious groups lived. There was no Syria, no Iraq, no Jordan as we know them today. Then, during World War I, two European diplomats, a Briton named Sir Mark Sykes and a Frenchman named François-Georges Picot, secretly took a grease pencil to a map and drew a line from the Mediterranean to the mountains of Iran. Everything north of the line would be for the French, everything south for the British. That crude line became the basis for the borders that have plagued the region ever since. Take Iraq. The British stitched it together from three old Ottoman provinces, the Kurdish-dominated mountains in the north, the Sunni Arab heartland in the center, and the Shia Arab marshlands in the south. Three distinct regions, three different peoples, forced into a single cage. Is it any wonder that the country has been held together only by brutal dictators, and fell apart into sectarian violence the moment that iron grip was removed? When you see fighters from the Islamic State ISIS bulldozing the sand berm that marks the border between Iraq and Syria and declaring, "We've broken Sykes-Picot," they are not just engaging in propaganda. They are tapping into a deep-seated historical grievance. They are attempting, in the most brutal way imaginable, to erase the artificial prison walls drawn by Europeans a century ago and redraw the map according to their own bloody vision. The tragedy we see unfolding in the Middle East today is, in many ways, the violent, delayed legacy of a few men with a map and a pencil. Our final destination on this global tour takes us to the very top of the world, to a place that has been a frozen, forgotten wasteland for most of human history, but is now becoming one of the most hotly contested pieces of real estate on the planet, the Arctic. For centuries, the Arctic was the ultimate geographical barrier. But global warming is changing that. The ice is melting. This is creating a new and dramatic geographical reality. First, new shipping lanes are opening up. The fabled Northwest Passage through the Canadian archipelago, which explorers died trying to find, is now navigable for several weeks in the summer. A ship traveling from China to Europe can cut its journey time by a week or more, saving enormous amounts of fuel and money. The same is happening along Russia's northern coast, the Northern Sea Route. These new highways of the sea could redraw the map of global trade. Second, and more explosively, the melting ice is uncovering what is believed to be a treasure trove of natural resources. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that the Arctic may hold as much as 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas and 13% of its undiscovered oil. Suddenly, the 8 Arctic nations, Russia, the United States thanks to Alaska, Canada, Denmark thanks to Greenland, Norway, and others, are scrambling to stake their claims. It's a new great game, a cold rush for territory and resources. And in this game, one player is far ahead of everyone else, Russia. Russia is an Arctic nation in a way that no other country is. It has the longest Arctic coastline, and it has been preparing for this moment for years. While other nations are just beginning to think about an Arctic strategy, Russia is building an Arctic army. It's reopening mothballed Cold War bases, constructing new ones, and creating specialized combat brigades equipped with snowmobiles and hovercraft. Most importantly, Russia has the tools for the job. To operate in the Arctic, you need icebreakers, powerful ships designed to smash through sea ice. Russia has a fleet of over 30, including the world's only nuclear-powered icebreakers. The United States? It has one functioning heavy icebreaker, a ship that is decades old. As one U.S. Coast Guard Captain Riley noted, they have cities in the Arctic, we only have villages. In 2007, Russia planted a titanium Russian flag on the seabed directly beneath the North Pole, a dramatic statement of intent. It is using scientific claims about its continental shelf to argue that its territory extends all the way to the pole itself. The other Arctic nations are scrambling to catch up, but they are years, if not decades, behind. The Arctic is a reminder that geography is not static. As the climate changes, the map changes, and with it, the balance of power. The top of the world, once a barrier, is becoming a new arena for competition, a new prison whose rules are still being written. And right now, Russia holds the keys. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through Prisoners of Geography, I find myself reflecting on what a profoundly humbling book this is. In our modern world, we're so often told that we can be anything we want to be, that our potential is limitless. We have technology that connects us in an instant, airplanes that shrink continents, and ideas that can circle the globe. And yet, Tim Marshall gently but firmly reminds us that we are still, in so many ways, bound to the earth. We are shaped by the mountains that divide us, the rivers that connect us, the oceans that protect us, and the climates that sustain or challenge us. Our leaders, for all their power, must operate within the rules set by geography. They can't move mountains or stop the rains. They are prisoners of the map. This perspective is so powerful because it helps make sense of a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable. When you watch the news and see conflict in the Middle East, you can now see the ghost of the Sykes-Picot line. When you see Russia's aggression in Eastern Europe, you can feel its centuries-old fear of the flat, open plain to its west. When you see China building islands in the middle of the ocean, you understand its desperate need to break free from its maritime cage. It doesn't excuse the actions of these nations, but it explains them. It gives us a framework for understanding the deep, underlying forces at play. So, how can you start using this new lens to see the world? I want to leave you with a few simple ideas. First, the next time you see a major news story unfolding somewhere in the world, do something simple. Open a map. Don't just look at the political map with its neat lines and colors. Look at a physical map. Where are the mountains? Where are the rivers? Where are the ports? Is the country landlocked? What are its neighbors like? Ask yourself, what does the geography tell me about this situation? You'll be amazed at the insights you gain. Second, think like a leader. Pick a country, any country, and imagine you are its president or prime minister. What are your geographical advantages? What are your vulnerabilities? Is your population unified or divided by mountains and valleys? Are your borders secure? This simple thought experiment can build a deep, intuitive understanding of the challenges and opportunities that nations face. Finally, remember that while geography is a powerful force, it is not an unbreakable prison. As Marshall concludes, technology, ideas, and human cooperation can help us overcome its limitations. The Panama Canal sliced a continent in two to connect the world's oceans. The internet has transcended physical distance. And the future of the Arctic presents us with a choice. Will it be another battleground for resources, or can it become a model for international cooperation in a challenging environment? Geography defines the board on which the great game of human history is played. But we, through our choices and our ingenuity, are still the players. That was a summary of Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. We've touched on the major themes today, but I have to be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a postcard of the Grand Canyon. It gives you an idea of the landscape, but it can never replace the feeling of standing on the edge and seeing it for yourself. The real magic of this book is in the details, the historical anecdotes, and the way Marshall connects the dots across continents and centuries. This summary is a map to help you decide if the journey is worth your time. If anything we've discussed has sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just learning facts, it's gaining a whole new way of seeing the world that will stay with you long after you've turned the final page. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if this journey through the world map has been valuable to you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another one of the transformative books on the billionaire's bookshelf. Thank you for joining me, and let's keep learning and growing together.